a topic in Form 4, and this topic is called coordination. So our topic is coordination. This topic is a wide one. It's a wide one. So you need to pay your ears. Now, when we are going to look at this one, there are several areas that we have to understand. First of all, we have to define the concept of coordination. Next page. So, what is coordination? What is coordination? So now, coordination means the linking together of different processes in the body. So now, different processes in the body or systems are linked together. They are working hand in hand to bring a response in our bodies. So we are saying it is brought by two body systems. So coordination is brought by two main body systems, and these are, number one, we talk of the nervous system. Number two, we have the endocrine system. So the nervous system and the endocrine system are linked together to bring about a response in our bodies. So you can see no any system work in isolation. No any system will work in isolation. The digestive system banks on very well on the blood circulatory system, because when the end products of digestion are digested, they are likely transported by blood to several tissue cells where blood food nutrients are being used. So you can see no any system in our body works in isolation. So generally, coordination is brought about by the nervous system and the endocrine system. So now, let us start by looking at the nervous system. So we are saying the nervous system, it is a system in which message travel electrically in nerves. So we have electrical messages that are conducted in nerves. So that's the nervous system. So we are saying a nerve consists of several nerve fibers that are grouped together. So nerve fiber is made up of a nerve cell which we call a neuron. So we are talking of the nerve fibers as a group of nerves that are containing neurons. So you can see from there. So let us go to the next page. Now on this page, we are going to look at the structure of a new neuron. In particular, we are looking at neurons, though we have pluralized that one. So we'll single out each of these. So now we have this neuron, and that neuron. So when we are looking at the anatomy of the neurons, basically we are looking at their structures, their parts. What do they contain? So now, a neuron has got what we call the dendrites, these projections. We call them the dendrites. And this one is a cell body. And this part here is an axon. Then you have a layer here. This layer is what we call the myelin sheath. Then we have these breaks here, these breaks here, these breaks. The breaks here, we call them the nodes of Ranvier, nodes of Ranvier. Then we have again the cells here. We have here a cell, we have another cell here, and there again. So we call them the squam cell. So here, down here we have the what we call the synaptic knobs here, and then we have the muscle fiber, the whole of this. So we have the neuromuscular junction. So in the course here, we have the neuromuscular junction as indicated in the diagram. So another neuron here, we have the parts again, but we have the receptor cell in the sense organ. Then we have the dendron, we have the same myelin sheath, we have the cell body, we have the axon. Then this is the direction of the impulse, the electrical message that flows along the nerve. So that's what we have on this again, on this nerve or neuron. We have the dendrites, these, which seems like the branches of the tree. These are projections called the dendrites. Then we have the dendron. Then we have the cell body here. Then this arrow means the impulse traveling in the neuron. So here we have other dendrites. So that's what these diagrams are all about. They are showing this structure or anatomy of a neuron. Next page. Now, on this one, let us look at the description of parts of the neuron. So how best can we describe each of those neurons? We have what we call the dendrites. Now, what are these dendrites? These are short fibers that project from the cell body of the neurons. So these ones, they are just projections from the cell body of the neuron. Now we are saying the dendrites conduct impulses from the neighboring neuron towards the cell body. So the main function of the dendrites is simply to conduct impulses towards the cell body. Second one, we talk of the axon. So the axon, it is the longest nerve fiber that projects from the cell body. So we can see that now the axon is extending from the cell body in a neuron. Now, axon conducts impulses from the cell body towards the neighboring neuron. Now, axon is wrapped in a fatty layer called myelin sheath. So myelin sheath consists of the fats. That's what we can say. So myelin sheath insulates axon so that impulses travel faster. So how are the impulses traveling in the axon? So that axon is myelinated to prevent loss of information or electrical impulses. That's why this one, the myelin sheath, is myelinated. It's composed of the fats. So the fats are acting as the insulators, protecting the impulse within the axon. So let us go to the next page. Now, again, a neuron has got what we call a cell body. Now, what is it then? So we are saying it is the part of the neuron that has a nucleus. So a cell body is a part of the neuron that has a nucleus. So now we are saying a cell body interprets sensory impulses and initiates a response. That's the main function of the cell body. So it has to interpret the sensory impulses and initiates a response. Now, having looked at the cell body, now let us look at the types of neurons. Now, we have the three main types of the neurons that you are supposed to understand. Number one, we have the sensory neuron. Number two, we have what we call the motor neuron. And thereafter, we have the relay neuron, which is number three. Now, these are the three main types of neurons. But now we need to distinguish them. We have to give their distinction, or we have to describe each of these each of these neurons. Now, let us go to the next page. Let us start with the sensory neuron. Now, when we look at the anatomy of the sensory neuron, the whole of this one, this diagram here, is a sensory neuron. We have to pay attention to a number of issues in this particular case. So we have the sensory organ here. Under this part here, we have the sensory organ. So a sensory organ could be an ear, it could be an eye, etc. Could be a nose, could be a tongue. All these are sense organs. Now, could be a skin, So if we look at this sensory organ, we have the myelin sheath. So this layer, a fatty layer, is the myelin sheath. Now, these are the Schwann cells here. These cells are called the Schwann cells. All these They are found either side of the neuron. Those are what we call the Schwann cells. Schwann cells. Then we have also to note the direction of impulse flow is from the sense organ towards the cell body of the sensory neuron. So at times you can be asked to indicate an arrow here above a neuron to indicate the direction of flow of the impulse. So generally this arrow here shows that the information is carried from sense organs towards the cell body to interpret and initiate a response. That's the idea there. So now here we have the cell body here, and this part here is what we call the middle, long middle part of dendron. Then inside it we have an axon. So an axon is connecting the cell body and the dendrites. Yeah, so the part which connects these dendrites and the cell body is called axon. So a dendron connects the sensory organ and the cell body. So that's what it means. So that is the dendron. So generally, this sensory neuron has got what we call the dendron. So here is the dendron. So dendron, don't confuse an axon. An axon is connecting a cell body and the dendrites. What about a dendron? It connects the two parts of the neuron, the cell body and the sensory organ. That's the issue there that you need to pay attention to. So here inside the cell body we see the nucleus. Remember, any animal cell contains the nucleus here. So the nucleus is the control center of any cell. So that's the issue. Now these are the dendrites and the other parts. That's about the sensory neuron. Let us continue describing it. Yeah, so here let us look at description of the sensory neuron. Description of the sensory neuron. So a sensory neuron is a neuron that conducts impulses from receptors. Receptors, these are the sensing organs. Receptors, we can take them to be the sense organs. They receive an impulse or stimulus. These ones are receiving stimuli from different sources of the environment. So as I said earlier on, the receptors could be the sense organs that we have. For instance, in the eyes, these we blink eyes when light enters our eye. Then the optic nerve carries information from the eyes into the what? Into the from the front part into the inner part of the eye itself. So you can see how pictures are formed if you have seen something, all these things. So now to the central nervous system. So the information is carried. If you have seen something, the optic nerve carries the information to the brain for interpretation. So you can see now. So we are saying a sensory neuron has a cell body along its action. So you can see the location of the cell body is along the axon. So the cell body is located along the axon. It has a dendron. So generally a sensory neuron has what we call the dendron. Let us go to the next page. Another one is what we call the motor neuron. Now you have to see the difference as we are going through this description of the neurons. You have to look at the distinction. How different are they in terms of the location of the cell body and other structures? So now here we are. This structure is what we call the motor neuron. Now on this one we have what we call the motor end plates. This one, the motor end plates on the muscles. So this one generally is located in the muscles of our bodies. So as usual, any cell, any sensory neuron has also the myelin sheath, likewise the motor neuron. So you can see the motor neuron has got only the axon. So the axon is only connecting the muscles there and the cell body there. So here we have the dendrites, then the whole of this is the cell body, then the cell body we have the nucleus here. So now long middle part, this one long middle part of axon. So you can see that the motor neuron has got only an axon and not the dendron. That's the thing. So that's the issue. Let us go to the next page. Now, description of a motor neuron. So this one is a neuron that conducts impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors. Effectors, we are talking of the good examples of effectors. We're talking of the muscles and then the glands. The glands, we have the parathyroid glands, we have the thyroid glands, parathyroid glands, all those things. We have the pancreatic glands. We have several glands in our salivary glands. All those things are examples of the glands. So it has a cell body at the end of the axon. So this one, the cell body is located at the very end of the axon. So that's the difference between the motor neuron and the sensory neuron. In terms of the function, we said that the sensory neuron carries information from the sensory organs to the central nervous system for interpretation. But then the motor neuron, in terms of function, the motor neuron carries information from the sensory neuron, connecting it to this central nervous system through a relay neuron or an intermediate neuron. Now we are saying its dendrites are joined directly to the cell body. So you can see that another difference, another point that we can note, that the dendrites are connected directly to the cell body, unlike the sensory neuron. Sensory neuron has got the cell body along the axon, where the dendrites are not attached there. Right, so we have also another one, which is the relay neuron. A relay neuron. At times, this one, a relay neuron is also called the intermediate neuron. So this one has got only a cell body at the middle, and then we have the dendron, then we have the axon there. So now remember, the axon carries information towards the cell body, and then the information continues to that side to enabling neuron. So this one, the main function of the relay neuron, to relay means to connect. So this one acts as a bridge between the motor and the sensory neuron. So this one can connect. The main function of the intermediate neuron or relay neuron is to connect the sensory and the motor neuron. Let us go to the next page. So we are saying the description of this particular relay neuron. We are saying it is a neuron that conducts impulses from sensory neuron to the motor neuron, and from that's why we are saying it is now connecting the two neurons, sensory and motor neuron, because it can conduct electrical information from the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. Now let us see, where is it found in the body? It is found in the central nervous system. Basically, the relay neuron is found in the brain. So when we talk of the central nervous system, we are looking at the two main components, the spinal cord and the brain. So basically, the relay neuron is found in the brain and the spinal cord. So we are saying it has a cell body at the middle of the neuron again. So this one is having a cell body centered at the middle of the neuron. So whenever we are given a neuron, we can identify it by looking at the location of the cell body. So that one can assist us to identify them. So you have to pay these important points here. Take note and understand that in the sensory neuron, the cell body is located along the axon. And here in the relay neuron, we are saying the cell body is located at the middle. So it's located at the middle of the neuron. So it has dendrites on both sides of the neuron. So it has dendrites on both sides of the neuron. Now, having looked at the types of neuron and their description, let us go to look at what we call the synapses. Synapse 1. Now, let us define what is a synapse. What is a synapse? That's the definition now. So, a synapse, instead, these are microscopic gaps between dendrites of two neurons. So, in short, the gaps that exist between two neurons, and these gaps exist between two dendrites. So, when we talk of microscopic gaps, we are talking of the junctions that exist and can only be seen by microscope. You cannot see them with your naked eye. That's what we mean by microscopic gaps. Now, synapses allow impulses to travel in one direction. They are very, very important. The gaps, these gaps that exist, they make sure that the information is traveling only on one direction. So another function is that they also help to filter out weak and unwanted stimuli. Sometimes the stimuli that the body may respond to might be not very important, but rather all this has to be filtered out. Let us go to the next page. So here we have an example of what we call the synaptic junction. Here we have two neurons. This is taken as one neuron, and here again is another neuron. Here. So now here, this arrow here shows the direction of impulse flow, and then inside here, these structures are called mitochondrion. Mitochondrion. And within it, within the neuron, we have another important structure, which is called the synaptic vesicle, which is filled with a neurotransmitter substance. Then here, at the middle here, where the gap is what we call the synapse now. This gap here, the whole of this gap. So now, within the gap, we have these substances, which are the acetylcholine. Acetylcholine. Now, on the end here, on the other neuron here, this part is called knob of the second neuron. Knob of the second neuron. And this one is the axon. Next page. So let us look at how impulses travel across a synapse or a gap. So we are saying axon of the neuron has vesicles that contain chemicals called the neurotransmitters. So the impulse at the synapse is transmitted through neurotransmitters, and these neurotransmitters we are looking at the chemicals that are released into the gap. This one of the examples of the chemical is called the acetylcholine. Acetylcholine. So we are saying when an impulse reaches the end of the axon, the vesicle bursts and release a neurotransmitter into a synapse. So this process is called the oxytocin. Now, when the neurotransmitter has been tied into the gap, so we are saying the neurotransmitter will diffuse across the synapse towards the membrane of the next neuron. So when the neurotransmitter touches the membrane of the next neuron, an impulse similar to the one in the previous neuron is produced and conducted away. So we are saying the neurotransmitter is then broken down by cholinesterase enzyme. So this enzyme is there to break the neurotransmitters into acetic acid and choline. So acetylcholine is broken down by actually an enzyme which is cholinesterase enzyme. This enzyme is there to catalyze the reaction to break down the acetylcholine into acetic acid and choline, so that they can be reused for the next transmission of the impulse. Let us go to the next page. Yeah, so we are saying the choline and the acetic acid combines again to form acetylcholine. That is used again for the next action. So other neurotransmitters are as follows. Apart from acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter, we have these two neurotransmitters again. Number one, we have what we call the dopamine. Number two, we have what we call the serotonin. We have serotonin. So those are the neurotransmitters apart from the acetylcholine. Next page. Let us now look at the description of the nervous system. Let us look at the description of the nervous system. We have three parts of the nervous system. So when we talk of the nervous system, we basically talk of three main components. The first one is what we call the central nervous system, which is abbreviated as CNS. So this one consists of the brain and the spinal cord. So what two parts are forming the CNS or the central nervous system? We are talking of the brain and then the spinal cord here. So that's the issue there. Then the second component of the nervous system is the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system consists of the nerves that conduct impulses from the receptors to the central nervous system and from central nervous system to the effectors. So you are looking at all the nerves that are actually controlled, that are connecting to the central nervous system, and from central nervous system they are also connected to the effectors, which are the muscles and the glands in particular. So the third component is the autonomic nervous system. Now, what this system consists of? So we are saying it controls involuntary action. Involuntary action, these are actions that occurs naturally without your control. So for example, involuntary actions such as breathing rate and heart rate. Heart rate, you are talking of the heartbeat, the number of beats of the heart recorded at a given time. So called the heartbeat, heart rate rather. Heart rate is how fast the heart beats. So let us go to the central nervous system. So in this one, we are basically not going to look at the peripheral nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. We are just going to concentrate on the central nervous system. Now, let us define the central nervous system. So it is part of the nervous system that consists of the brain and then the spinal cord. So two parts are making or forming the central nervous system, the spinal cord and the brain. So the central nervous system interprets the sensory messages and initiates a response. That's what it means there. Next page. Now let us look at individually at these two main components of the central nervous system. We start by looking at the structure of the brain. At times we call it the anatomy of the brain, the structure. Now if you look at the brain, this is the person here. This is the person here. So we have this part here, which is folded here in folds. We call it the cerebrum. It is the cerebrum. Now we have this part here, which is the thalamus. Then we have this part here, this portion here, this part here is the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum. Then we have the skull. This part here is the skull. Then we have this part below this, the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus. This. Then below the hypothalamus, we have a very important gland here, which is the pituitary gland. Then we have again this part of the brain here, which is the cerebellum here. It's the cerebellum. So this part here is the pons. Then down, right away, we have what we call the medulla oblongata. So this one is the spinal cord. So these are just the neck bones. These are neck bones. So let us look at the description of each of these. Next page. Welcome. So we are going to look at description of the brain now. So it is part of the central nervous system that lies in the skull. So the brain is found within the skull. So the skull is protecting the brain because it's a delicate organ. So we are saying the brain is divided into three parts. These are, number one, we have the cerebrum. Number two, we have what we call the cerebellum. Number three, we have what we call the medulla oblongata. Next page. Let us start by looking at each of these three types of the brain. Cerebrum. We are saying it is the largest and foremost part of the brain. Cerebrum is divided into two halves, which are called cerebral hemispheres. So we are saying each hemisphere has three different parts of areas. So these areas are, now the cerebrum is divided into these parts. We have the sensory area that receives messages from sense organs such as eyes, the skin, and the tongue itself. So we have the sensory area. The sensory area can interpret issues from sensory organs, from tongues. If you are tasting something sugary, for sure, it will go directly into the cerebrum, which interprets that one, whether it is a sugar, whether it is a honey, all that goes into the sensory area. We have also the motor area. This one sends messages to effectors such as the muscles and then the glands. Then finally we have an association area. So this one stores information from the past experience. Yeah, so generally you learn from the past, as it is said. It is said that we learn through experience. So that experience is stored in the association area. Next page. Let us look at the two layers of the brain. We have what we call the gray matter. So the gray matter, it is the outer layer of the brain. The gray matter is concentrated with the cell bodies of the neurons. So most of the cell bodies are located in the gray matter. We have also the white matter. Now it is the inner layer of the brain. So the white matter is concerned with nerve fibers. So we are saying the brain and the spinal cord are covered by three continuous sheets of connective tissues. So these tissues, we call them the meninges. The meninges are the connective tissues of the brain. Generally, we call them the meninges. They are membranes of the brain. So meninges are simply membranes of the brain. Let us go to the next page. So these membranes are tough and translucent. Translucent meaning they can allow some light to pass through. But then once they are very clear, that's what it means. So they are tough. They have protective nature. So we are saying these membranes are tough, and that because they are toughness, they are able to protect the brain. So number one, we have what we call the dura mater. Now, this one is placed against the body surface of the interior of the vertebra and the cranium. Number two, we have what we call the arachnoid. This one is the middle layer of the brain. Then the third one is called the pia mater, the very third one. So this is the innermost layer of the membrane. It is in contact with the brain. So the pia mater is very close to the brain, and we are saying the region between the arachnoid and the pia mater is filled with the fluid. So this fluid is the cerebrospinal fluid. So this fluid performs these functions. So the cerebrospinal fluid performs a number of functions. Number one, acts as a shock absorber or absorbs shock in simple terms. Number two, distributes oxygen and food nutrients. Number three, it also has lymphocytes which protects the brain against infection. So you find some lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are types of white blood cells. So now we are saying we have the cranium. This one, the top of the skull, surrounds and protects the brain. So we are saying the spinal cord surrounded and is protected by the vertebral column, while the brain is protected by the cranium or the skull. Next page. Let us look at some of the functions of the cerebrum. So we are saying the gray matter of the brain controls the following. Number one, speech. For you to speak loudly, for you to speak, somebody should be able to hear you. It means the cerebrum is working there. Number two is for emotions. Others become sad or angry. Memory, it can store things. Number three. Number four, for intelligence. Some people have got their IQ, intelligent quotient, is very high. Others very low. It's because of that brain. Again, we smell things. The smell of feces, the smell of eggs, flying eggs. The smell of meat because of the cerebrum. Vision, we are able to see things properly. Issues are connected to the cerebrum. Taste. When we talk of taste, we're talking of something bitter, something sweeter. Something sweet, something bitter. Touch. Whether some touch can cause pain to our skin and whatever. So it also controls those issues. Let us go to the next page. So the cerebrum is adapted to its function as it is highly folded. That increases the surface area for the cell bodies. So we can see that one of the adaptation of the cerebrum is that it's highly folded or highly convoluted. That's the biological term. But now, being highly folded, that gives greater surface area for the cell bodies. So we are saying the folding of the human brain also enables humans to carry out more complex activity or difficult activity that other animals cannot do, such as writing, cycling, bicycles, driving cars, and digging. Such activities are complex, they are controlled by the brain. So we have also the cerebellum. It is the second largest part of the brain. It has two layers like the cerebrum. These are the gray matter, which is the outer layer, and the white matter, which is the inner layer. Next page. Functions of the cerebrum. Number one, it controls balance, posture by managing muscle tone. Muscle tone, we are looking at the stretch of the muscles. It coordinates muscles during walking, cycling, and running. Then let us look at the medulla oblongata. It is the part of the brain located beneath the cerebellum. Medulla oblongata forms the brain stem. It originates from the base of the cerebellum. Let us look at functions of the medulla oblongata. Number one, medulla oblongata controls autonomic processes such as breathing rate, heart, and blood pressure. So these are controlled by the medulla oblongata. Number two, the medulla oblongata has hypothalamus that manages homeostasis. When we talk of homeostasis, we are meaning keeping the internal environment of our bodies constant or to remain the same. That's what means by homeostasis. It can keep the concentration of carbon dioxide and oxygen in our blood to remain constant, to remain the same. So by that, we are saying medulla oblongata performs homeostatic functions. If they say state any one homeostatic function of the medulla oblongata, we can say it controls the internal environment, monitors the level of carbon dioxide in the blood. So we can also do that. So next page. So on this page, we are going to look at how the brain is protected from the injuries. So the brain is protected by cranium of the skull from the external injuries. It is surrounded by three membranes, and these membranes are called the meninges. So the meninges are the membranes of the brain. So these ones are they are separated by cerebrospinal fluid, which acts as a shock absorber. Now this one is a diagram, a transverse section of the spinal cord. So this one is a transverse section of the spinal cord. Now on this transverse section of the spinal cord, we have the receptor organ. This one is the sensory neuron here. We can see the cell body here. Then the spinal nerve. It has this one is the relay. Then we have the junction here, which is the synapse. So here we have the cell body, and then we have the gray matter here. We have the ganglion there, we have the dorsal root ganglion, we have the ventral root. This one is white matter, and then this is a relay neuron. So here we have even the central canal. This hole here at the center is called, this small hole here is called the central canal, which is having the cerebrospinal fluid, which can actually act as a shock absorber. So here we have the motor neuron here. You can see it's connected to the muscle fibers here, to the effectors. This one is a muscle. So it's an effector organ, e.g. a muscle fiber. So on this one, we have the ganglion, we have what. So that's what this one is all about. Let us go to the next page. Let us look at the description of the spinal cord. So we are saying it is the cylindrical mass of the nervous system that begins from medulla to the end of the vertebral column. So we are saying in the vertebral column, the spinal cord passes through the neural canal of the vertebrae. Now, vertebral column protects spinal cord from external physical damage. So we are saying the spinal cord has a hole at the center called the central canal. So this canal, which I pointed out earlier on, it is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. So this fluid acts as a shock absorber. So cerebrospinal fluid also supplies nutrients to the nerve cells in the spinal cord. So you can see the essence, the importance of cerebrospinal fluid. Number one, performs the function of shock absorber. Secondly, it distributes oxygen and other food nutrients to the nerve cells so that they keep on to be alive. Two layers of the spinal cord. We have the white matter. It is also an outer layer of the spinal cord. So the white layer is concentrated with the nerve fibers. Next page. Let us start with the gray matter. The gray matter, it is the inner layer of the spinal cord. It is concentrated with the cell bodies of the neurons. So most of the cell bodies are located in the gray matter. So let us look at the spinal nerves. Now these spinal nerves, we are saying these are nerves that are joined directly to the spinal cord. Human beings have got 31 pairs of nerves. Each pair has two groups of nerves. These are, number one, we have the sensory nerve fibers. We have two motor nerve fibers. So the sensory nerve fibers conduct impulses from receptors such as sense organs to the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord here. So we are saying the motor nerve fibers conduct impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors there. And then the nerve fibers enters the spinal cord through the ventral root. So you can see that the central nerve fibers enters into the spinal cord through a dorsal root nerve fiber, which enters a spinal cord through ventral root. Next page. Let us look at functions of the spinal cord. Number one, it conducts sensory impulses from receptors to the brain for interpretation. Two, it conducts motor impulses from the brain to effectors for a response. A response is a reaction. Three, it controls reflex action below the neck, e.g., withdrawing a hand from a hot object and a knee jerk. So the spinal cord controls the reflex actions, the knee jerk and the withdrawing of a hand from a hot object. If you accidentally touch fire with your hands, you withdraw your hand from a hot object. That one is a good example of a reflex action. So all these functions are performed by the spinal cord. Next page.
Simutaya nthawi yanu kufunafuna maphunziro muzakhala wotumidwa moyo wanu wonse. Ngati simuphunzira anthu azingokutumani ajala kalime ajala kuchwe manyazi ajala katende yanti ndipo anthu ophunzira wandu wotumanso kwambiri. Ndiye ngati simuphunzira skulu akuyikirani aba mukhala otumidwa.